New summer, new you, right? Not with those old hand-me-down clothes in your closet.
Yeah!
Aren't you sick of dressing like a jabroni every day of your life?
What? Why would you say that?
Lucky for you, our summer solstice sale... can we cut that?
Can't afford it!
Our summer solstice sale has got you covered. The biggest discounts on this year's hottest fashions. Suit jackets, 25% off all brands. Perfect for that interview you got coming up.
You're hired.
Dress shirts, buy one, get the other one 50% off.
2 shirts.
Free alterations with the purchase of any brand pants.
Even Jordache.
And all the accessories to complete your new look. We have belts, we have hats, we have chains. Put all that together, you got quite a little outfit going on, Buster.
Zoot Suit.
You'll be walking around the streets of LA looking like a regular cab Callaway. Our discounts cover big old hats and big old pants, whatever that timeless look is.
It's a Zoot Suit.
We sell all clothes of all styles year-round, whatever you're into.
We only sell Zoot Suits.
But I think the look I described is pretty hot stuff.
Don't tell him. He thinks he's fooling you.
Why waste your prime years in skinny jeans when you can sport pants so tent-like people will think your legs are being fumigated for termites?
Get up and go, Pinocchio.
A hat so big you won't even know when it's daytime.
Fashion eclipse.
Chains so long and so jangly, you'll think you're being visited by a certain ghost on a certain holiday in a certain Dickens novel. Marley, my old business partner?
I made up for my sins in life by buying a Zoot Suit!
The bigger the clothes, the bigger the discount.
Zoot Suit!
We got a type of clothing for every letter of the alphabet, from A, clothing store, to Z.
Zoot Suit!
Spend your summer solstice in style, your one-stop shop for all types of fashion. Head over to our store, Zoot Suits and more.
Zoot Suits!
At the intersection of Zoot Suits Avenue and Big Vans Boulevard.
Zoot Suits.
Hi, and
Hey.
welcome to LA Weekly, episode
we've
66.
turned up our smooth knobs on the dial at the 10s and 2s, at the 1s and 10s.
We're talking jazz today, all the jazz you can handle, from bebop boop 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 to
We're discussing elongated vowels. L's a vowel. Welcome to episode 66, everybody.
and almost never Al. Sometimes Y and almost never, but once
They make a
Al.
point.
Yeah.
And on podcast L. Yeah, welcome to episode 66. Get your kicks with executive order.
Get your kicks executing order 66.
Get your kicks.
Get your
66.
kicks. You're stupid. You don't make any sense.
You're stupid, and you've proved it 66 times already. Hello, everybody.
Hi, how's it going? Am I everybody to you?
Yeah,
How's it
you
going?
sure look like everybody.
Oof.
Whoa.
What? You look generic and normal. What?
Your mom is so generic and normal. You're also generic and normal. Her genes were
Genetically.
so strong. And they had to be strong because she was so big.
You're rude. Welcome to Rude 66.
That could be our spin-off podcast where we drive down Santa Monica and just be rude to people.
Hey, that's better than this idea. Rude 66.
It's June.
It is June.
Happy June.
Happy
Father's
summer.
Day, June gloom. Happy Solstice.
Solstice. Hammer Solstice sale.
The big Hammer Solstice sale. We've talked rude enough. Let's get into what we've done in the last month, Greg.
Oh,
Greg,
okay.
what have you done what did you do last month?
Well,
Greg?
this might surprise you, but you were involved in it.
No.
And your fiance.
Prove it.
And my girlfriend. For my girlfriend's birthday.
Who's the same person?
We believe in a sort of Three's Company situation.
Have you heard of a thruple?
We're a triple threat, but mostly to just the idea of marriage to normal society.
We're a triple threat to conventional love.
The four of us, for my girlfriend's birthday, we went to the Pacific Dining Car, which was
did.
very enjoyable.
Oh, wait.
yeah, you were there.
Yeah.
You were that long-haired girl.
You were that lady I kept hitting on in the dark. Yeah, we did. That was really nice. It
was really nice.
Let's describe our experience there.
Okay.
First of all, when you walk in, I thought it was just a dining car, like Carney's. I thought it was going to be like, oh, this is a long, thin restaurant, but there's like extensions and rooms, and I kept going into different things of like, what is this, a caboose? Like, is this the admiral's quarters?
Is this a bunk room? I don't know. How did I get here?
Where's the boiler? We were at the bar, which is kind of in the back right.
Yeah, when you walk in. inside, and to the right, it's closer to the building, to the next building over. It's a nice little room there. It's very well lit. Yeah. It's very beautiful. I thought I was in a scene from The Shining for a moment with the old waiter.
The old waiter who says he's never existed. He kept telling me to teach them a lesson, and I didn't know what he meant.
I had to correct somebody. We got there really early because we thought it was going to be the same thing with Musso and Frank's, where we would have to split 2 chairs amongst 4 people.
Yeah. Which, by the way, if you're going to be watching Once Upon a Time in Hollywood or just a screenshot or the trailer, the spot in Musso and Frank's where Brad Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio meet Al Pacino is where we were having our time at Musso and Frank's.
Exactly. That was our 2 significant others sitting in those seats while we stood over them. Like, how is it like to sit down?
I'm washed up. I'll never know. How long did the waiter say he's been doing it?
I can't remember, but
it was in the 80s.
It was a very significant amount of time.
And he was in his 80s at least.
He was a very old man who knew exactly what he was doing.
Yeah.
I had a gin martini, right? We went to Kohl's beforehand to eat because we didn't want to eat at Pacific Dining Car because it's kind of pricey. We just wanted to get drinks there and enjoy the bar. I went to Kohl's. I got a gin martini, and it's like in a little sifter, so you get like a little bit, but it's very strong. We went to Pacific Dining Car, and he's like, "Do you want it on the rocks?" I'm like, "Yeah, okay." And he gave me like a jug, like it was a full rock glass,
moonshine,
of gin martini. I'm like, I shouldn't drink this much, and then I had 2. It was very nice. It was very lit, and we surprisingly got a tour because we were staring at old pictures. And
and one of the waiters came up, Jimmy. His name was Jaime.
Oh, he called himself Jimmy.
He says he's Jimmy LA.
That's what it was, Jimmy LA.
Because he could see me squinting and confused that his name was Jaime. Are you saying hi to me?
I'm looking at your name tag right now.
Jamie.
That's right. It was Jimmy LA. That's
Jimmy
right.
LA. But we were lingering around after, because I had a banana, not a banana.
What did you
fudge
have?
Brownie sundae. Hot fudge sundae.
I love you
hot
going.
Fudge brownie sundae.
Brownie fudge hot dog.
Brownie fudge hot dogs. Reporting for duty. So I was taking pictures, and he's like, that picture right there is from when we first opened.
Yeah, when
and
we
this
were
right
just
there,
car.
and now you're confused why there's so many more. And then he's like, "You guys want a tour?" And he took us around to each room, and he's like, "This is where they filmed Training Day. This is where I overheard Nicolas Cage get denied a hotel at the."
That's right. This is where all the was it the Dream Team or was it all OJ's friends?
I don't know who he said exactly, but people involved with the OJ trial were
there after the verdict or whatever.
He heard things. He was telling us about all the different. He kept referring to Jack Black as Blackjack,
and we knew exactly who he was talking about. Yeah. We didn't 21. No, Jack Black.
Yeah, he was telling us about all the celebrities and not just celebrities, but like the mayor and the district attorney and all these people,
Hollywood people,
all
heroes,
these
villains,
all these people who don't officially exist on paper, the underworld. But he was just telling us about how entrenched that place is in LA history, and it was really nice.
It was very nice.
And then he told us about how there's certain times of the year where you can sign up for their membership club, which is free to do, but they only accept a certain amount of people at certain times of the year. And if you sign up in your birthday month, you get a free meal, a free steak, and you have to pay the price of a meal for a side. That was
very
fun.
enjoyable. Yeah, I really liked it.
It's part in our series of old LA restaurants we're going to, because we couldn't think of other ones really. We didn't know what the other ones were. We did Musso and Frank's, we did Pacific Dining Car. That's it.
There has to be
We've
more.
been to Tommy's.
There's more. I'm trying to think what they are offhand.
Hey, send us your oldest LA restaurant.
The Culver Hotel.
Applebee's.
Me and Ada did that. We did Kohl's, which is old.
I don't consider... Cold. Yeah, Kohl's, of course, and Philippe's. I don't consider a restaurant in a hotel to count, though.
No, what about the Biltmore's?
What about the Biltmore, stupid?
What about the Biltmore restaurant, whatever is inside in the bar?
But is it the same exact restaurant that has always been there?
True.
Because the places change all the time.
True.
But yeah.
It's very enjoyable.
It was enjoyable. And I found street parking. Yeah. It was really, because it was a Friday night, wasn't
and that's a hard area to park. So we tried to go to the Monty Bar before, which is just down the street, and I could never find parking around there. Yeah, but you found parking easily.
I found parking very easily, which was, because you were like, nope, not
going to happen, brother.
Not ever. You might as well take an ambulance to that hospital because you're not going to find parking. Oh, you found parking. Can you drive me to my car?
Can you please drive me home?
You want to know what I did?
I guess.
I guess my life isn't of interest to you.
I hope it's Pacific Dining Car because you were there too.
Oh, but in a different room. Oh, jeez. Yeah, we had dinner in a different room before we met you. We're sitting far apart from each other.
Yeah, I know.
Normally we're across the table from each other.
Nose to nose.
Yeah. Podcasting nose to nose, which is my favorite Nat King Cole song. But now we're on further. We're almost like we're like Citizen Kane having dinner.
That scene in
what? Here's what I did this past month. I went to the Gibbon Conservation Center.
What's that?
I think it's pretty clear. Melissa had gotten me a Groupon for us to go for, I forget what, Just for being a good guy.
Yeah, just for having long hair.
Hey, you passed 4 inches. First of all, where it is, it's 19100 Esguerra Road in Santa Clarita. So it's like way, way up. It's almost towards, it's in Super Bloom territory almost.
Oh, okay.
They're open Saturday and Sunday only 9:30 to noon. They have tours at around 10. But here's the thing. So you go there and it's a gibbon conservation. Yeah. It's all these different cages with all these different types of gibbons, which are an animal.
Yeah.
A sort of a monkey, if you will.
Are you explaining gibbons to gibbons? You're a type of monkey.
You are a monkey. Act like so.
Go poop at me. I know you want to. I'm here for that kind of thing.
Eat banana, make me feel better about how evolved I am. They have all these different species, and the lady who runs it, she was giving the tour that day, and she lives there. Like, she lives on the premises, and she's like the world authority pretty much on gibbons. Like, people from other zoos in other countries call her like, our gibbon's sick. Like, what do we do? He stubbed his toe. His hands are too big.
Jane Goodall Gibbon?
That was her name.
Yeah, Jane Goodall
I thought
Gibbon.
It sounded familiar. Jane Goodall, not apes. Gibbons this time. I thought it was a weird name, but she's from the Czech Republic, so I thought it was normal. Yeah. But so she's like the leader of the place, the leader of the pack. And the thing is, there's one gibbon. There's a female gibbon there who's the leader of the gibbons, and she feels challenged by this woman, this human woman.
Yeah.
So whenever she starts giving the tour, the lead female gibbon, because gibbons do these calls, they're like, woo, 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 like they do that.
Like a Three Stooges?
Yeah. Oh, that's why they all had those haircuts.
That's why they were dressed like house painters.
This was the funniest episode of Gibbon Conservation Center. They all go to a seafood restaurant. So the leader gibbon feels threatened by leader human woman when she starts giving the tour. She's like, you're not the leader here. I'm the leader. So when she starts giving the tour, the female gibbon starts doing her tour of noises. She leads the song, they call it. She'll start going, woo, 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 woo. And then there's probably like 40, 50 gibbons there. Then they'll all start going, woo, 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 and they make I'll post a video, but they make the craziest like ray gun, like 50s ray gun noises. And that'll go on for about 30 minutes and she can't give the tour. They say on the website, song may delay tour, because like you can't hear anything over this noise, and it goes for like 30 minutes.
That woman, when the song starts, she hangs her head and like, you're all getting a refund. I'm so sorry that this happened again.
Gibbons, this is why you all live here. We can't afford to send you anywhere else because we keep giving refunds. But yeah, the song is crazy. The monkeys are really interesting and cute, and they're very charismatic. They all have names. I think there's a documentary coming about this. Wow. About this place, and they have a little gift shop that has these cool shirts and stuff. But if you like gibbons, you should go to this place, get a Groupon, or just go and pay. I forget how much it is.
You got a shirt?
I stole one.
Oh, okay. I took one off a gibbon.
I ripped the shirt off of a gibbon and said that you look like my build.
You walk similar to the way I walk.
How about you gibbon that to me?
Okay.
It's a fun place.
That sounds nice. I never heard of that place before.
There's a few places kind of in that area that are animal reserves that are just way out in the middle of nowhere, and I'll go to all of them.
Do a tour in a day and don't go to the zoo, because who wants to park there?
Build your own zoo. The zoo's easy to park at, okay?
Yeah.
What? It has the biggest parking lot in the city.
It's adequate, I guess, but like you go on a weekend, you're going to be parking. Where are you going to park?
In the parking lot.
No, I'm parking in the back? I'm parking at the Autry now.
Yeah, park at the Autry. It's across the smallest street in the city. Okay, yeah, so that's what we did in the past month. Do those things. Go see the gibbons and then eat an animal that is a friend of a gibbon.
Gibbons only have gibbons as friends.
So it's June. Guess what we're going to be talking about?
Something not very summery.
Something, yeah. The
it happened in the summer.
Yeah, it did. It's the anniversary, June 3rd. It started in 1943. We're going to be talking about the Zoot Suit Riots.
The murder at Sleepy Lagoon and the Zoot Suit Riots.
Yeah. Did the Sleepy Lagoon stuff happen in June also?
No, it happened in August.
Let's reschedule. We'll release your part in August, and my part won't make sense.
It never does.
A long time ago, in a city that we live in, that's sometimes far away, something bad happened in this city, and we're going to talk about the Zoot Suit Riots, which, unless you really know what happened, I think because of the involvement of Zoot Suits and then the song, you kind of forget how bad it was.
I think people will sometimes come across pictures on the internet and be like, that looks awful, and then like nobody really sits and tries to get the whole story.
This isn't like Swingers.
I knew more about the Zoot Suit Riots growing up because my brother was really into that stuff, and as I got older, I didn't know that it stemmed from it's related sort of to a murder that happened. I became obviously more interested in the murder than people getting stripped on the streets.
Hey, spoiler.
It's all awful though. One doesn't win the other one. They're both really bad.
No, I think at the end of this episode we're going to rank the greatest tragedies in Los Angeles. We'll rank it by
tragedy.
This is our new list for LAist. The top 10 tragedies of Los Angeles.
Number 1 is I can't park at the zoo. Even though it's advertised as a lot of parking, somehow I'm struggling.
That's Matt Damon's new movie.
Because there's a tour...
There's so much parking. Okay, so
the tour buses come. They take up like 18 parking spaces because they don't know how to park because it was designed for tour buses.
Well, where's the gorilla going to park when he comes into work for the day?
With his sunglasses on. Take me to Lesser Monkeys.
Shoot. I was supposed to be at the Give and Conserve. Let's get this started. Let's stop anthropomorphizing zoo animals and let's talk about one of the greatest tragedies in Los Angeles history.
Yeah, let's switch gears dramatically. Can we do that? We've never been good at that before.
No, that's not something we do. We have one gear. We're an automatic.
We are two guys pushing a car that broke down in the middle of the freeway.
Our one gear is neutral.
Our one gear is we have to push before we pass out. I'm going to start. You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay. My sources...
wait. Let me...
Jesus
Turns out I'm not
Christ.
ready. We're going to save the listener questioner for the end of the episode. We're going to try, again, something different. All right, now I'm ready.
You got another one?
Whoop, 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 whoop.
Jesus Christ. I was worried that we were going to take this seriously, and nothing to worry about there.
I'm ready now.
Giving me a break. I sunk to your level for that. Okay, I picked at 2 books, mostly from my research. There was Murder at Sleepy Lagoon, Zoot Suit Riots and Riot in Wartime LA by Eduardo Obregon Pagan, and Sleepy Lagoon Murder Case, Race Discrimination and the Mexican-American Rights by Mark Wheats. The whole ordeal. Both of our topics today starts with a birthday party. The same way the LA Riots...
sounds fun.
It doesn't go well, though. The same way the LA Riots started with cops pulling a car over. It's a microscopic event, but the events that unfold are the tipping points for a seismic social moment that is decades in the making. So let's supply a lot of context before we get into it.
I have context too.
Yeah? You can jump in on mine if you want.
No.
You do it. No,
my context is different. I'm going to tell the story from the white perspective.
Poor sailors. I'm going to be repeating stuff that we've already talked about in other episodes. I just have to bring it up again. Los Angeles was once Mexican territory, not news to anybody.
What?
How did this happen?
Was I sleeping?
Also not news to anyone in LA. LA has always had a significantly large Mexican population. Not news to
Where are they? Not in Porter Ranch.
During the 20s, the city goes through a huge population boom, which I feel like I've said once an episode for the last 10 episodes.
I know.
People were coming from all directions for different reasons. Some of the reasons that Mexicans were heading north around this time was to escape the perils and aftermath of the Mexican Revolution, which lasted from 1910 to 1920. Then, 10 years later, 1931, at the beginning of the Great Depression, President Herbert Hoover was thinking, how can I get more Americans jobs during this pressing time?
How can I get this brassiere onto my body?
I'm not going to lose weight. I'm going to figure a way out. I'm going to put this on and not lose weight. Instead of thinking of a real solution, he just had 1 million Mexicans deported. This is nationwide. It's not just in LA.
This is the repatriation.
Yeah. In Los Angeles.
Sounds nice.
For those who don't know, you could have been born in America, child of an immigrant, and still be deported. It did not matter.
Not in today's world.
That's a thing of the past. In Los Angeles, with our huge Mexican and Mexican-American population, this was a massive exodus. They had raids at La Plaza at scare tactics to get people to try to go back to Mexico on their own. They raided businesses and hangouts to arrest and deport people. There were some major companies like Ford and U.S. Steel and Southern Pacific Railroad that worked along with the U.S. government by telling Mexicans they would be better off with their own people, and they just laid off thousands.
Wow. Not even just laying them off to say,
yeah,
you're better off not with us.
You're better just not.
This document says, go back to your own kind.
I know that you were born in Simi Valley, but you got to go back home. So
ancestral home. Back to Africa.
Mexicans and Mexican Americans were scapegoats in the Great Depression, and getting rid of them was done to satisfy unemployed Americans. I'm glad that is not the situation anymore.
There's so many things in this, like, I can't believe that's how it was like in the 40s.
What's this, 2040? Like I was saying, this was not about illegal immigration. This is about skin color. It didn't matter if you're born here or there. It's just like, we need jobs for white people. Our story takes place in the 40s, right after we entered World War II, so nationalism was being hammered into every aspect of American life. But not American isn't a country made up of several people of different ethnic descents, just white people, mostly white families, American as white. Now, I'm not going to be hypocritical and say, how dare white Americans scapegoat and stereotype Mexicans? That's wrong. All white people do that. I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, I was trying to avoid that too, of like, well, it was the whites versus the Mexicans.
Yeah,
but like,
no, not really.
Not most of them.
Yep. A large percentage. Definitely 60-40. But the fact of the matter is that during the 40s, when everyone was being American rah-rah, their idea of Americans was white families. Again, not news to anybody. Anyways, around that same time, very close, in fact, to the events of the story, the Bracero program is initiated.
Right.
And that was the guest worker program where Mexican men under contract could come live in America to work on short-term, mostly agricultural jobs that Americans didn't want now that there was a vicious war. It created industrial jobs for them. Oh, and speaking of the war and the reasons that we went into it.
What war?
Wait
a minute. Did I sleep through this one again?
The one with Germany, but that could be 2.
The future war with Germany?
World War V.
They're going to skip right to X. World War X. worse.
It just sounds sexier. Pearl Harbor was attacked in December of 1941, and almost immediately the Japanese population in Los Angeles was in trouble.
By the way, if you don't like Greg's recap of all this, stay tuned for about 40 minutes from now when I'm going to say the same exact thing.
Mine's just cooler. There's just
a little more street.
Can you drop a beat behind talking? With Japan working with the Nazis, all Japanese and Japanese Americans were looked at suspiciously. After all, the following year, Lucille Ball's Fillings led the government to a Japanese covert Japanese radio station run by spies.
That's not fillings, not feelings.
Fillings.
Feelings,
like her teeth.
These fillings. Filling feels friendly fire. Friendly fire. Okay, I'm warmed up. Friendly fire. White flight. Friendly
white flight. But of course, not every Japanese and Japanese American in Los Angeles were spies or even aligned with a nation of Japan other than just through ethnicity, which makes the next move pretty brutal. As we've covered before, February of 1942, FDR signs Executive Order 9066, which is this episode, sending 120,000 Japanese Americans to internment camps, another unconstitutional act done against
and also
US
to the Santa Anita current home of horse death.
Yeah, and so begins the Santa Anita horse curse. It took a long time to get going.
They set the date wrong. They got the AM PM mixed up.
All horses are gonna die. You watch in 70 years. It didn't matter how much you loved America or how hard you worked to make a home in this city and country. You were a spy. You were Japanese, therefore you supported Japan. Your small children who were born here and couldn't point to Japan on a map, they're the enemy too.
Who don't know they're Japanese.
Yeah,
they support Japan.
I just thought I was from San Pedro. Like, what? Therefore, you have no rights. Enjoy the Santa Anita racetrack. Enjoy Mazinar. To all this, of course, Ellie meekly says harumph. So the tune in the air of Los Angeles at the time was anyone who isn't a white family is a national threat, which sounds a little like the people we were fighting in World War II, but whatever. Scapegoats, racial stereotypes, that was the order of the day in Los Angeles. What Harry Chandler and many other people consider to be the great white spot of America. That's the order of the day.
Yeah.
So now let's...
White paradise or whatever they called it.
Exactly. Great white spot. I just said it right now.
I think they called it the white paradise. No, wait, what did they call it? What did they call it?
So now let's get to Zoot Suits. I'm sure you were going to talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, but it's good to reiterate. It's good to hear
the same
them.
Episode.
Yeah, it's good to hear over and over again what a Zoot Suit is. In the intro, in your part of the episode, and in my part of the episode.
Just tell us which one is the best description.
Yeah.
We'll have a poll, and you'll probably say the intro, and we'll be like, you weren't listening. You don't know what it is.
We saw that you only listened to 3 minutes. YouTube told me.
Oh, by the way, we could tell when you stop listening. Anyways, Mom, to sum it up really simply...
We know when you're not listening.
To sum it up really simply and carelessly, Zoot Suits were flashy suits. Normal dorks wore gray flannel suits. The young jazz-loving hipsters, they wore Zoot Suits, which were then, and kind of now...
Let's hear it.
Seen as cartoonish and exaggerated.
Yeah.
If you think that you've never seen one before and you need a visual understanding or reference point, think Cab Calloway, think the yellow Zoot Suit Jim Carrey sports in The Mask, think the 2 out of the 5 better dressed weasels in Who Framed Roger Rabbit, think the 1944 Tom and Jerry short called Zoot Cat.
Of all those things, that's the one everyone.
My brother Mondo, that was his favorite. If he can do screenshots at the time, he would have done screenshots of that.
He was drawing.
Yeah, he was just
tracing his TV.
Just tracing his TV. Tom in
Look at this screenshot I made. Screen sketch. That's another warm up. Screen sketch. Screen sketch. The villain in Incredibles 2. Screen sketch. We saw a baby the other day that looked like Jack. By the way.
Did you suddenly like Incredibles 2?
No, I shook him to see if he was going to flames. Yeah.
Get mad. Turn into jelly. Get mad. Huge balloon pants that tighten in the ankle. Boonie. I put boot shiny, so obviously shiny dress shoes, hats with a huge brim, shirts with a huge collar, suspenders normal size, and a long chain for your pants, and it looks really cool when you twirl it.
You can't mess around with suspenders.
No, any alteration to a suspenders and your pants are going to fall down, which is a new look. My favorite suspenders are the ones that hold a barrel over your body.
I'll tolerate all this, but I will not have saggy pants.
You had a long chain. It looked really cool when you twirled it, and you had a big, long drape coat to top it all off. The look could also include, for ladies and gents, a well-groomed but giant pompadour.
Yeah.
Looked pretty cool.
But also, it wasn't just the pompadour. There was a ducktail.
Oh, the ducktail, yeah. What do they call it? Zoot Suits grew out of the drape suits that were popular in Harlem dance halls through the mid-30s. The big pants that were tapered to the ankles, that was to prevent jitterbuggers from getting tripped up while they were dancing.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and by the 40s, drape suits had evolved into Zoot Suits, and they were worn by young people from working-class neighborhoods, predominantly Mexican-Americans and African-Americans. The style was then and is now what I call extreme dapper. Like, I don't want to just look neat.
Exagger-dapper.
Exagger-dapper is a perfect way to put it. I don't want to just look neat. I want to look like the best thing you've ever seen. Like, classy and flashy, and it has associations with jazz and resistance, and even before the events that we're going to talk about later,
and also the reiteration of all this we're going to talk about later. I'll give you another description.
Better worded. The Zoot Suit was fashion.
I won't say boonie like Greg did. Ugh, idiot. Boot shine.
Boonie was better than boot shiny, which was what written on my paper.
Jacket big, boot shiny, arm sweaty, knees weak, palm sweaty.
The Zoot Suit was fashioned as rebellion. How so? Well, in a couple ways. First, in 1942, as we all know on this podcast, everything was turned into bullets. The Wartime Production Board wanted...
I also have that joke later.
Jesus Christ. It's a joke that we try to make every episode. Oh, the 40s? What was turned into bullets now?
Well, you'll hear.
Tune in later. The Wartime Productions Board wanted to cut back on fabric consumption, so fabric was being rationed, limiting the amount of fabric used for suits.
What would you say it was being turned into?
Munitions.
We need those pointy collars to get through panzers.
We need these boot shinies to take down tanks.
General Patton, we need a boonie strike.
I refuse.
We simply cannot. There was a big sock hop the other night.
The boys needed it. They're turning bullets into suits. That's our new thing, is a parody within a parody.
Shoot suits as they wanted them to be.
Oh,
for the war effort.
The war effort. Shoot suits.
Shoot suits.
All
right, I'm warmed up.
They would not ration their suits, and they would get their suits through bootleg tailors, which was my two favorite word combination now. Bootleg tailors.
I was going to say that.
But you can say it, but better. So there's a ration ban, and you're wearing an exaggerant suit. That's how wearing a suit
you're wearing rations.
Yeah, you're wearing rations, so therefore you're not a patriot. This is an unpatriotic act that you're doing.
We decided to start making the suits out of meals ready to eat. We didn't have enough wool, so...
We're making suits out of space ice cream now?
Yeah.
Oh, did you guys want that? We turned water in Michigan into suits?
Yeah. That'd be kind of cool, like those shoes that had like a goldfish in them, but like a suit jacket that was clear, but was filled with water. So there's like water.
Oh, yeah.
So you're wearing...
Aquasuit?
An aqua suit.
Yeah. Well, Sailor's going to beat them up too. Or would they like them because of the water?
They can't. Try punching that. I dare you to try punching
I dare
water.
you. Oh, no, I'm leaking. Oh, no, you're leaking water all over the place. I'm dying.
My clear blood.
So the rations. That can be one way that fashion was rebellion. But there were...
Fashion
rations. But there was another reason. And what truly made suiters truly rebellious was their pride. The suits are not subtle. They demand attention. This very act went against the stereotype of the Mexican in Los Angeles, really against any non-white ethnic group in Los Angeles. The thought was, if you weren't a wealthy or middle-class Anglo, you were to be meek and subservient. Your role in the city is to be a worker. You break your back under the hot sun for nickels, picking the fruits and vegetables that will keep movie stars healthy. That's your job. So the young pachucos who wore suits...
We gotta feed Clark Gable, and Clark Gable is hungry.
He's hungry. If he doesn't find carrots to eat, he's gonna hurt a woman tonight.
Oh, too late. Take that, Clark Gable. Again,
this is your one-stop shop for Clark Gable hatred. So the young pachucos, they wore zoot suits. These guys defied all of that. And here's another thing about it. This was a wholly American subculture. Young Latinos from the neighborhoods who were adopting this from like jazz players from the East Coast, this wasn't a thing they got from their parents. This was American-born Mexicans diving into American culture. So traditional Mexican parents disapproved as much as the stuffy Americans who thought Glenn Miller was edgy. Like both these, like they had no backing. Like they only had each other for support. They didn't have anyone older. Like you're doing the right thing.
There was no Obi-Wan Kenobi leading the Pachucos around town.
There wasn't. It was only young people.
Yeah.
Their parents disapproved. American culture disapproved. This was like a subculture all on their own. So these Zoot Suiters, these Pachucos, they were a youth rebellion, you know, and this has to be said before anything. They were also just young people living in America, having an American life, hanging out with people. This American life. They were hanging out with like-minded people, and when you're young and you're like-minded, you get into trouble. There's no excusing any of that, but that's just American life. Teenagers and young macho men, they suck, but that's across the board. Football players in Texas are doing the same stuff. They're also young men getting in trouble.
I'd argue worse.
They're not as well dressed, but like it's just troublemaking. Like it's not, you know, terrorists. They're not Al Qaeda.
Yeah,
that's what I'm trying. They're not the kids today on YouTube. It's like I'm gonna join. I'm gonna join a terrorist organization.
Kids these days and they're Al Qaeda. Will you get off your Al Qaeda already?
What's the new one? I keep forgetting the name of it.
ISIS.
ISIS.
That's the old one at this point.
Oh, what's the new one?
I don't know, CrossFit.
Also an old one.
Yeah,
although I didn't find
Pokemon Go.
How long have you been outside, son? Days, Mom. And I've had a lot of new ideas. Although I didn't find too many specifics. What was worrying a lot of people in the city was a rise in crimes committed by Mexican-American youths. What they were calling a very adorable term, boy gangs. We gotta stop these boy gangs.
They're NSYNCs, your backstreets.
This was around the time where gangs were starting to form. But it wasn't like the way it is now where there's established parts of it. Like, you have to get a tattoo. You have to get jumped in. These are our borders. These are the people.
Bible.
Yeah, this is our Bible. It wasn't there yet.
Secret societies at this point.
This was still just like groups hanging out on rec centers who the people on the other side of this hill don't like us and we don't go there. It was the formation of that, but it wasn't quite gang culture outlet yet. I couldn't find too much specifics. The books I was reading, they kind of gave like some headlines and stuff. You know, there was some trouble going around, but it wasn't like this vicious crime wave that the papers made out to be. There was a lot of exaggeration, yeah. So what I'm trying to say is if crimes from this community was on the rise, it wasn't because they were Mexican American like the LA Times was saying. It was because they were angry and they were like just average rowdy people with friends. It's the kind of thing that you grow out of, but they were being demonized in the press for this kind of thing. So all of this this is just background noise to an evening in August of 1942 in Maywood near Williams Ranch, which is bordered by Slauson, Atlantic, Eastern, and 26th.
I don't know where is this in the city?
It's near Bell. Maywood, Bell, and Vernon are all kind of neighbors. In the square in the Maywood, Bell area, there used to be a reservoir where people in the neighborhood would hang out, and it was called Sleepy Lagoon, but the locals named after the popular jazz standard of the same name. I used to think that the song was named after the reservoir.
Because I don't even think I knew there was a song, but you were playing a song called Sleepy Lagoon before we started recording. I was like, oh, they put this to music.
Play this to the tragedy footage.
Yeah.
Sleepy Lagoon is such a beautiful, dreamy name, but a lot of reading. Me too. Yeah, it's a really cool name. But
very Andy Griffith.
It is very Andy Griffith.
Meaning it should be only for white people.
Sleepy Lagoon sounds like a very wet Twin Peaks, like Twin Peaks, but swampy.
Yeah.
Thank you. I would love to talk this stuff over the theme of Twin Peaks.
Bob's theme, though.
It's just girls screaming.
It's one girl.
Two girls in particular. One girl and the same actress who played her cousin. Sleepy Lagoon is such a beautiful, dreamy name, but a lot of readings describe it as a water reservoir in a gravel pit, which is not a good name for a jazz standard. There's a little grassy area.
Kind of is.
Glenn Miller could do something with it. It had a grassy area of about 60 feet of gradual slope towards a bank, and there was a cement dike 5 feet high that ringed the reservoir, and the water was deep enough to swim in. So Sleepy Lagoon was a swimming hole and a lover's lane type hangout place.
So this was man-made, or?
Yeah, it was man-made.
Okay.
It's not like a beautiful lagoon like I thought it was. It's mostly just like a reservoir that, like, imagine a lagoon here because a galoon. Imagine a lagoon here because we don't live on the good side of town. It was popular with the locals because segregated pools were a thing in 1942, but no one could stop you from hanging in by the reservoir.
There's no segregated lagoons.
Yeah, no, there's no segregated reservoirs. This is just like industrial city stuff, and you could swim in industrial city stuff. We don't care what you guys do, says the city of LA. Sleepy Lagoon isn't there anymore, but I read the approximate location was in Maywood at 5500 Slauson Boulevard. There's another place I read that was 5400 Lindbergh Lane. They're about a mile and a half apart, so Sleepy Lagoon was probably around this general area, which is all industrial now. It was later replaced.
Start digging.
Yeah, start digging.
See how wet it is down there.
Ooh, evidence. It was later replaced by a plastic factory and a government warehouse facility, and nothing remains now of Sleepy Lagoon. Anyways, August 1st, 1942. A party is being held for Eleanor Delgadillo Coronado, who was turning 20 years old.
The party old for a birthday party in a lagoon.
Is this a Patton Oswalt bit?
Patton Oswalt.
The party took place just up.
This is how we treat our idols.
People we love, and Clark Gable.
Our two idols. The two biggest influences in my life. Clark Gable and Patton Oswalt. All right, I'm warmed up now.
Yeah, you got it. I'm going to read this whole paragraph again. August 1st, 1942. A party was being held for Eleanor Delgadillo Coronado, who was turning 20 years old. You want to do your joke again?
What is this, a Patton Oswalt birthday party? What was my joke?
I don't remember. The party took place just up from the road that passed Sleepy Lagoon. In attendance was a young man named Jose Diaz who lived just north of the Delgadillos. Now, he was born in Durango, Mexico in 1919 at the age of 4 in 1923.
How many people have we talked about recently, I feel like, who came from Durango?
I don't know. I know somebody else came up. I can't remember who, though.
Yeah.
I don't know. This podcast empties out. As soon as I'm done researching, it completely empties out. And I remember one tragic fact from each episode.
I normally pride myself in remembering every resident we've talked about from Durango. This one escapes me.
So his family, 1923, they leave Durango, Mexico because of the revolution, the aftermath of the revolution. They entered the U.S. as refugees, and they traveled around California a bit before settling near the city of Bell in 1928 in a small bunkhouse on Williams Ranch, which is like a series of little housing units for people working in a factory nearby. He grew up in a close-knit community of Williams Ranch with many other working-class families, mostly Mexican, some Asian families. So August 1st, 1942, this was his last weekend ever, but it was also his last weekend before he was due for military service. He had just been certified fit for duty, and he planned to serve his country. He wasn't much of a partier, and he wasn't really a drinker, but this was his last weekend with family and friends, and here was a birthday party, so he's going to drink some. Yeah.
That's so horrible of like, fine,
I'll let go this time. So this last weekend, he was letting loose, drinking with the party. So the story gets a little bit confusing. When I was reading it, as I wrote it, it started making more sense. So maybe I don't need to do this, but I wrote it down anyways. I split the 3 parties into 3 groups, Group A, Group B, and Group C, just to make it easier if you have problems following like I did when I first started. Eleanor's party, that's Group A. So Eleanor's party is going all right. It's kind of slow, but people start trickling in around 9 o'clock. But around 11 o'clock, a rowdy group of guys who
A.M.?
No, PM.
Oh,
dangerous.
That's late to be in a lagoon.
No, they're troublemakers. 11 p.m., they're troublemakers. Around 11 p.m., a rowdy group of guys who are uninvited start causing trouble when the beer runs dry, and they start shaking.
White or Mexican?
Here's the thing. I read both. Like, I read Anglos by one group of people, and then I read...
It's beautiful that they can come together like that to ruin someone's birthday party.
I read Anglos in one thing, and another thing I read that they were Mexican, or at least Latino, but I can't get a good hold because we don't Group B. Group B. The boys from Downey.
I hate
Group B. Group B is the guys from Downey. So these guys from Downey, they are forcibly removed from the party, and they are not taking it well, and they are promising to come back and fight.
Did they know them, or they just saw a party?
They kind of knew each other. See, here's something I'll get to a little bit later, and I'll reveal it now. All the parties, because they grew up in such a close proximity, they kind of crossed each other's paths a lot, because a lot of people worked in a packing plant. They all went to similar high schools. So you cross paths, but you didn't necessarily hang out with everybody. Everybody had their cliques. So they might have passed each other. There might have been a couple people in Group B that knew people from Group A, but they were wholly uninvited. Around the same time, a group of friends from 38th Street neighborhood, which is about 5 miles west, they pull off Bandini Boulevard and onto Williams Ranch to go to Sleepy Lagoon. It's Henry Levas and his girlfriend Dora Baca. They're both from 38th Street, and they were already there with their friend Bobby Dallas. This is Group C.
Bobby Dallas?
Bobby Telles. Tallis.
Oh, okay.
This is Group C. So this group is about a quarter.
Well, where's Bobby Dallas?
He's fine.
Where in the world is Bobby Dallas?
I need to know right now where Bobby Dallas is, which is a great name.
It is a pretty good name for a newscaster.
Bobby Dallas Reigns. So Henry and Dora and Bobby, they're already at Sleepy Lagoon, and then like another, I think like 10 people altogether now hanging out at Sleepy Lagoon from 38th Street neighborhood. They're about...
So the party's a little away from Sleepy
Lagoon. It's about a quarter of a mile, or a mile and a quarter away.
That better be accurate.
We can take steps. Oh, no, sorry. Quarter of a mile. I got it right. The group is about a quarter of a mile away.
Now I don't know what we're talking about.
I don't know where I am in this story. The group Sleepy Lagoon is about a quarter of a mile away from the party. Group A and Group C are detached by that. Okay, so Group C is there by the lake. Mm-hmm. They're all kind of hanging out by their cars still. And at this point, a group of 3 guys in a Model A Ford come driving by, and they start talking.
Better not be a Group D.
They start talking S-word to Group C.
For what group are they?
I believe that they're part of Group B. It's never confirmed, but I'll get into it. I assume, and some other people assume, that this is an offshoot of Group A, this car here with the 3 guys.
What, you mean Group B?
Group B.
You said A.
Oh, sorry. I read Model A.
I'm glad you labeled them all to make this less confusing.
Sorry. So the boys from Downey, Group B. I believe this car, the Model A Ford. I know? Okay, I know.
You're kidding me.
It's a Model A Ford. That's the type of car it is.
Wait, so who's Group T?
From what everyone thinks, a part of Group B detaches and they cross Group C at the lake.
In their Model A.
And their Model C. Now, they start exchanging words, and the words aren't good.
Were they B words?
They were B words, yeah. They were S words and B words. Henry Levas, he starts talking back, and it goes back and forth. And the guys possibly from Group B, they drive off, and, whatever, it doesn't really matter. So Group C, they start spreading out over the lagoon to be kind of separate. Henry wants to be with his girlfriend. These guys want to hang out over here, and they kind of spread out. Around 30 minutes later, Henry and Dora are attacked by about 16 young guys, possibly Group B, or if it's not Group B, then the guys from in that car that drove by. Anyways, those guys came back. About 16 guys beating up on Henry, kind of shoving Dora around. His friends from the neighborhood, they rush to his aid, but all it does is spread 16 guys amongst the 10 people from Group C. So now the entire group of friends is getting beat on, and when they leave, Henry was able to identify some of those guys as they're from Downey. These guys are from Downey, and so possibly the same, boys. The Downey boys, AKA possibly,
Group B. Drivers of Model A,
which is
father
Group
of
B.
Mr. T.
So now the group of friends from Group C, after suffered a tremendous defeat, they went back to Los Amigos Club, and they kind of sulked. That's kind of their hangout spot, and they didn't like what happened. They knew they couldn't let something like that go. They were attacked as a group, and they knew that they would have to retaliate with a larger group. So soon enough, about 6 cars full of friends from 38th Street, they were rounded up at Los Amigos Club with the purpose of going back to Sleepy Lagoon to
defend Group C.
They were Group C, and they were going to go back to where they got beat up because they thought they were
growing their
ranks. They were getting more people around and be like, well, they beat us up. There were 16 guys. Let's bring 30 guys back.
So it's Group C plus now.
C plus. Group C is growing. So we're going to go back to beat up the guys from
Downey. 7,
Downey.
8, 9.
Thank you. Yeah.
I get it. I finally get it.
I was listening to an old episode, and you broke a story up just to get that joke in before, and I'm glad that it's happening again.
I'm glad I've grown.
Yeah, you've grown. So they go back to Williams Ranch. It's about 12:30 now. So they return to Sleepy Lagoon, but of course, it's empty. Why would those guys be there? Group B is gone. They could have, at that moment, just called it and went home defeated. But someone said, I hear a party going on.
About a quarter of a mile to a mile and a quarter away.
Maybe that's the boys from Downey. Maybe they're up there partying. Maybe that's they crossed our path.
So here I was thinking Group C were the good guys.
They weren't, because they already... Okay, anyways, they got kicked out. What they heard was Group A, the Delgadillo party. So 3 cars from Group C, they head over to Group A. It's not the entire group. It's not all 30 people. It's 3 cars. So it's probably like, I think, 8 to 12 people go over to Group A. At this point, the party is winding down a lot of people have already left by 1 a.m., and many people, including Jose Diaz, they're on their way out. He was actually about 10 minutes, they said, out of the party when the guys from 38th Street pull up, looking tough and holding sticks, ready to fight. And some girls were dancing on the patio. Some guys were out smoking cigarettes and drinking. And Henry led the group, asking where the guys from Townie were. And the people who were at the party had no idea what they were talking about, because they weren't relating to the people that got out of the party or the same people that they had no idea what was happening. These 3 cars full of tough guys come up, so they don't know what's going on. So one of the guys at the party, he was shielding his girlfriend, and he looked a lot like one of the guys who attacked them at the reservoir. He wasn't, but he looked a lot like him, and that was good enough. So Henry attacked that guy in the party, and the guys from 38th Street, they all start brawling for several brutal minutes. They're all fighting each other before someone shouted the cops were coming, and they all split, which wasn't true. It was just a way to break up the fight. The people at Eleanor Delgadillo's party, they were beaten and they bloody, but everyone was alive at the end of the fight. And the group from 38th Street, they returned to Los Amigos Club, and they were somber, like they didn't like what happened either. They wanted to get back at the guys who beat them up, and they knew that it wasn't it, but it happened anyways. They weren't satisfied. So back at the Delgadillo's house, they began to assess how bad the fight was, because it was spread out farther than just the patio, and that's when they found Jose Diaz face up, pockets turned out of its pants, beaten and stabbed, struggling to breathe, just north of the small pond near the reservoir, about 3 houses down. What was your question?
How'd this happen?
Nobody really knows. I'll get into speculation near the end of my thing.
How far away was he from?
He was about 3 houses down. He was a little bit closer to the lagoon. So a lot of things, maybe like 3 things could have happened. 2 things are really probable. So the ambulance was called, and his brother rode with him to the hospital, but he died there at the hospital, maybe like an hour or 2 after they were admitted him. He had a cerebral concussion, and he'd been stabbed in his diaphragm and his breastbone. He had a large swelling above his nose, and he was still bleeding inside his left ear. One of his fingers was broken. There was no clear understanding of where Diaz was during the fight, but some people said that they saw him leaving with 2 guests several minutes, up to like 10 minutes before the arrival of the 38th Street gang. There was also speculation that maybe like he passed out because he was drunk, and maybe it was abandoned.
He fell on a knife.
He fell on a knife. Some people were like, oh, maybe he got hit by a car, but that doesn't really make a lot of sense
no,
either.
Cars don't, unless it was a model knife and it had a knife sticking out.
Oh yeah, I have a knife at the bottom of my car. His pockets turned out as the big thing around that. From what I understand, some people who were attacked at the Delgadillo party had suffered small knife wounds too, so it's pretty evident that he was stopping his way out, roughed up. But the details are always going to be a mystery.
I mean, if your pockets are turned out, you'd think someone was looking for something in your pockets.
Exactly. But is that, do you get beat up and then someone as an afterthought is like, oh, let's see if he has anything in the pockets? Or do they?
I mean, it could be,
it could be both.
In video games, once you've, killed an enemy, you loot their body.
In Sonic, when you hit a bad guy, you get the coins. Yeah. It's not why I hit the bad guy, but I did get the coins. This encapsulated night is a real horror story. There's 2 instances of uninvited guests, 2 brutal and unexpected fights, and a murder. It's a real tragedy, but everything that follows goes down in the racist lore of Los Angeles.
Yeah, I'm trying to see because this seems to be a Mexican on Mexican incident.
I remember reading the thing that was like everything that happened after Sleepy Lagoon couldn't be racist because the media was defending Jose Diaz, but like they never found the killer. How hard did they work on that? Like they were just looking for like see what they do even to their own people. It was just like ridiculous. You will get it.
Yeah, because I don't really know the story that well. So far I don't know what the aftermath of this is. Yeah,
we'll get into all of it. Yeah, because
I'm not racist. I just want that to be clear.
I don't know because one thing should be said about August 1st, and I'm
comparing Mexican people to Sonic the Hedgehog.
Okay, here we go.
Say that.
One thing should be said about August 1st and all the people involved. I don't think any of them identified as being Pachuco or even were wearing Zoot suits.
Yeah.
I remember reading the thing that like none of them. I mean, maybe a couple of them, but like it wasn't like across the board a hard Pachuco gang or anything. It wasn't that. I think it was just Mexican American youth involved in a huge deadly mess, and they were synced with this larger intangible social outrage towards the Mexican youth problem that the press was fired up about. And this one moment is a catalyst for all kinds of further wrongdoing, starting of course with the Los Angeles Police Department.
The heroes of this episode.
The LAPD reaction was swift and broad. On August 10th and 11th, LAPD rounded up more than 600 people, virtually all of them Mexican or Mexican American, in what was called the Great Raid. They blockaded the main streets in Mexico.
The Great White Raid.
The Great White Raid. They blockaded the main streets in Mexican American neighborhoods. They stopped all cars entering. The occupants of the cars were removed. They were searched. The cars were searched for weapons and contrabands.
This is kind of like what happens in my story, except not as gentle.
Well, LAPD kind of sounds nice here. Most of the 600 arrests came on charges of suspicion of assault based on almost nothing, suspicion of robbery, and suspicion of auto robbery. Historically, these 600...
Suspicion of you're not white.
Something's wrong. Why are you not at work right now? Historically, these 600 arrests
were... Trying to go to work.
Please, my job starts at 2 a.m. Please let me go. Historically, these 600 arrests were really seen as a guise to just scare up the Mexican-American community. Many were taken into custody, and around 400 people were immediately released. They were fingerprinted, and then they were just released.
Gathering DNA.
I can pin this on somebody. Many were taken into custody. Oh, I said that. 175 remained in custody.
Gathering DNA. Oh, I said that.
175 remained in custody on charges of possession of weapons of different kinds. Amongst the 175, 24 young men were detained for the murder of Jose Diaz. These 24 men were all guys from the 38th Street neighborhood, Group C. Under the arrest was Henry Levas and many guys from the 38th Street neighborhood, including Angel Padilla, Joseph Valenzuela, Lupe Levas, Benny Alvarez, Eugene Caprio, and Manuel Reyes.
I love the name Benny. Like Benny.
Benny's a good name.
Well, no, that was Bobby Dallas.
Dallas.
Benny's a good name. And surprisingly, a lot of Mexican kids had that name, I feel like, in the 40s and 50s.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm Benny Diaz. Here I am. What do you want?
What do
I'm
you
here
want?
To join the mafia. I'm Benny Diaz.
Why does he have to join the mafia? Why can't he just be like a police officer?
Because it sounds like an Italian name.
All Italians are mobsters.
I'm not saying all Mexicans are in the mafia. I'm saying all Italians are in the mafia. My defending of I didn't say something racist against Mexicans was me saying I was saying something racist against Italians.
It'll give Italian American Association another reason to hate us.
Add it to the list.
A lot of people who were taken into custody, they said that they were verbally and physically abused when they were brought in for initial questioning. Confessions were coerced if they couldn't be easily obtained. Some of the boys said under questioning that they were slapped or punched by LAPD officers, and one suffered a blow so hard it knocked him out of his chair. God. Anyone who was not cooperating with the police was kept incommunicado, even from their lawyers, until the police got the information that they wanted out of them. Some of the men were booked under different names, so lawyers and family members had a harder time finding them, which bought the police more time with the suspects. Some of the women of the 38th Street who were involved in this were also arrested and questioned, but never physically harmed. But there were women who were also arrested for all of this brawls and stuff. The case then went on to a grand jury, which I finally had to look up the difference between a grand jury and a criminal trial because I didn't know the difference. Grand jury helps you determine whether charges should be brought against a suspect, while a trial jury renders a verdict guilty or not guilty at the criminal trial itself. I didn't know the difference before. Now I know.
I'm glad we finally got to the bottom of that.
Did you know the difference?
I don't care about crime.
I just committed. I don't worry about what happens to me afterwards.
I'm not on that part of the game.
So very quickly, the case went to a grand jury as conspiracy to commit murder, and Jose Diaz was a victim of gang violence. Basically, a young group of people were involved in what seemed to be a coordinated attack. Many of the boys in that group were minority youths with police records, and a young man was found dead after a gang departed the area. That's all that they needed. That's just what they were going to get charged on. Mm-hmm. Only 2 jurors spoke out against many of the assumptions that were not being displayed, such as, was this an act of gang violence? What constitutes a gang? Was this murder premeditated, or was it manslaughter? Were they even the ones who committed the act? There's no evidence. The 2 jurors that spoke up were Harry Braverman, who we don't know, and a woman that we spoke about on this podcast before, Charlotta Bass of the California Eagle.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I'm going to be talking about her in
I'll do a Charlotta Bass high five?
Yeah.
All right. The Bastion. The trial did go forward as a criminal trial with the 22 defendants in October of 1942. Also, a big moment in the grand jury proceedings, I kind of skipped over, was when high-ranking members of the LAPD and Sheriff's Department testified before the grand jury regarding youth gangs and violence in Los Angeles from Mexican-American youths, and it's not great. Many of these statements, these high-ranking officials stated their belief that Mexicans were predisposed to violence genetically, that Mexican youth gathered at rec centers and developed into clannish, self-centered groups and refused to associate with other recreational groups. Lieutenant Edward Ayers of the Sheriff's Department said that the main basis for this Mexican youth violence was biological, and that while Americans fought with fists, Mexican Americans resorted to knives and other weapons to fight. All of this hammering...
They hurt more. Why wouldn't you?
All of this hammering home the idea that Mexicans were violent by nature, which is, of course, racist and not true. And for a city looking for a scapegoat, this spelled blood in the streets. That's your side of the story. The parents...
Oh my God, I was talking about something else in the street.
Oh no. I just have the lyrics to Zoot Suit Riot over and over.
5.5 pages. It's a long song, Greg.
It's the In-The-Gata Da Vida of the 80s or the 90s. The parents of the defendants then had to secure legal representation, but that was expensive. Basically, the 2 suspects were split amongst 7 lawyers with money pooled together by the community. The trial in many ways was a catastrophe. The defense was made up of 7 lawyers of differing skill levels and experience. They had a difficult time agreeing on strategies and would on occasion argue in front of the jury.
Talk about a Three Stooges episode.
We got to cross-examine the witness, you bozo.
Boink. The judge is hitting them on the head with the gavel.
Order.
Hey, I'll take that order. That's the Three Stooges.
In unison. The woman defending Henry Levas, Victor Segovia, and Edward Grandpe was named Anna Zaksek. She was a Hungarian-born
Oh my God, does she work at the Gibbon Conservation Center?
This is her.
Oh my God, I knew it.
I
knew she was way too old to be alive.
She was a former silent film star, and she has a supporting role in Birth of a Nation under the stage name Olga Gray. Uh-oh.
Might not want to hire her.
She would rely on her stage experience as a dramatic actress to make up for her lack of legal skills.
What she learned on the set of Birth of a Nation.
She learned on the set of Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. They said that she was pretty good at giving impassioned speeches and stuff, and like...
But they were all... no one could hear what she was saying. Just mouthing the words. Where's this title card?
When the girls on 38th Street took the stand, they refused to speak out against the boys. They were seen as uncooperative and openly questioned why they were being prosecuted as a gang when they weren't a gang. The prosecution even had a hard time establishing who the leader of the gang was because none of the participants from 38th Street thought of themselves as a gang, so why would they need a leader? We didn't have a leader. We were just friends hanging out.
Yeah.
Despite this, they continually referred to them as a gang, and the prosecution and police centered on one guy as their leader, and that was Henry Levas.
I hate the justice system.
It's really bad. I am rewatching the Made in America thing about OJ, and I'm like, whole thing's broken.
It's a new annoyance I've developed of people being like, well, this is how it is.
Yeah.
But no, it's not. It's not how it is. We'll prove it. That's how it is.
And they wonder why I think that I'm Charles Bronson from Death Wish. And they wonder why I walk the streets armed.
Armed to the teeth.
Armed to the teeth.
Armed to the tits.
Tits. I just have stuff strapped to my chest. That's what I'm trying to say.
Like Herbert Hoover.
And while all of this was going on, the young men were being held in LA County Jail. They were being denied haircuts. They were not allowed to get a change of clothes during the first month of their 13-week trial. When defense attorneys objected that the messy-looking 38th Street guys looked like mobsters, the Judge Frick, ruled against the motion. He also ignored defense attorney objections to their courtroom's seating arrangements because instead of sitting them next to their lawyers, the defendants sat in 2 rows of seats facing the jury, which prevented them from consulting their attorneys during the proceedings. Also not helping, the all-white jury were allowed to go home at night.
Except for Charlotta Bass, or was this a different?
This was a criminal trial. She's part of the grand jury.
Okay. Well, what's the difference? I wasn't listening.
Did you write down the difference between the two? Also not helping, like I was saying, the all-white jury were allowed to go home and read the news of the trial, as well as stories on juvenile delinquency that focused primarily on Mexican
ask your neighbors what they think.
Yeah, get your neighbor's opinion on what they think. The guy in the Klan mask, ask him what he thinks about all
the
this.
mayor.
So their judgments were being skewed. This was one of the most historically unfair trials in America to date. This case, People versus Zamora, named after Gus Zamora, which is one of the guys. This case was the largest mass trial in California history, and it was a gosh darn catastrophe. Underneath all of this, a defense campaign was being organized, though, led by Josefina Fierro.
Guy Fieri?
Yeah, Josefina Fierro with Carrie McWilliams, LaRue McCormick, and many other labor organizers and activists. The Sleepy Lagoon Defense Committee was created to make an effort to even the playing field in what seemed like a racist and unfair trial.
The Dream Team.
They helped spread the word around the country to other activists that this trial against Mexican Americans was going forward with no evidence except racist speculation, and they also helped to raise funds to hire a lawyer to replace one of the 7. His name was George Shibley. He was a fiery and energetic attorney who frequently locked horns with the judge, which probably in the long run was not good. Despite all of this, the young men were found guilty. 3 of the defendants were found guilty of first-degree murder, including Henry Levas. Him and 2 other guys were given life sentences at San Quentin. 9 were found guilty of second-degree murder and were given 5 to life at San Quentin. 5 other defendants were convicted of assault, and 5 were acquitted. Also reprimanded were the women involved with the night at Sleepy Lagoon. The women of 38th Street refused to testify against the gang during the trial. Due to their refusal to cooperate, they were sent to the Ventura School for Girls, a women's reformatory without benefit of trial or jury.
God. Is that a prison, or is that just...
It was like a reform school, which was like a prison.
Yeah. Homework, am I right?
Nah. Backpacks, am I right? Dora Blanco, Henry's girlfriend, was among the 5 women sent to this reformatory. Also, one of these girls was Lorena Encinas, who had attended Eleanor's party. She was from 38th Street. More on her later. The defendants had a lot going against them.
Are you expecting me to do it?
You wrote about her, right? The defense had a lot going against them during all of this, but the foundation of this unfair trial were the array of Los Angeles newspapers damning the men, calling them goons of Sleepy Lagoon Lagoon. Speaking of...
It's kind of clever, though.
It's not the worst. Speaking about the wave of violence from Mexican Americans, this kept jurors and the public against the accused. After they were taken to prison, the Sleepy Lagoon Defense Committee, they kept at it. They're trying to seek justice for these men because, yes, they had trespassed. Yes, they assaulted his family, but there was no evidence they had murdered Jose Diaz. It was unjust that they would serve life sentences for something no one had admitted to, and there was no evidence or eyewitnesses accounts of. So committee quickly drew people from the community, from the film industry, and from labor unions. Alice Mcgrath joined the defense committee after the 30th Street men were in prison, and she took on the role of executive secretary of the organization. Every 6 weeks, she paid visits to the men in prison. She reviewed the progress of the committee and overall just tried to raise morale against them, telling them, like, you aren't alone. We see what's happening to you. It's not fair. We're working to help get justice for you guys. 2 years passed at Sequins, and the SLDC, the Sleepy Lagoon Defense Committee, they raised enough money to get a second trial, and the case was moved to the 2nd District Court of Appeals, which I did not look up what that meant. In October of 1944, Judge Clement Nye overturned the verdicts of the case, citing the insufficient evidence and the denial of the defense's right to counsel and overt bias of Judge Frick in the courtroom. Their sentences were overturned, and Henry Leivas and the other incarcerated men from 38th Street were released. So they're out of prison.
What year? When was this?
1944. So this is so they're released from prison, and their lives are completely changed and stuff, but they're out of prison.
Any money?
I didn't read about that. Probably not, though. It's the 40s. Why would they?
I was thinking about that because this guy, I guess, just got released from prison after 45 years. And they gave him $1.5 million. That's it.
That's your game plan now? That's your payout?
Because I was thinking, like, I would do like 2 years. If I could get $1 million to be falsely in prison for 2 years, I'd do it. But 45 years and all they gave him was $1.5 million.
Yeah, that's a real bummer. All he got was $1 million?
You'll be able to buy a house and then you'll have to go back to work. You shouldn't have to do that if you were falsely in prison for 45 years.
Just move to Detroit. Houses are cheap there because no one wants to be there.
Yeah, well, then you're
living
back in prison.
It's a different kind of prison. We love Detroit. We love Michigan.
We want to expand our market.
All right, you ready for this?
Yeah.
Then comes the deathbed confession from Lorena Encinas.
Oh, no.
See, while everyone was concentrating on Henry Leivas, there was a background character who was not even part of the 22 defendants that should have been looked at and wasn't, and that was her brother, Luis Encinas. So Lorena Encinas and many other people from 38th Street neighborhood ended up at the Delgadillo house that night, invited, but her brother, Luis, wasn't. He was one of the people who showed up with the Group B, friends that crashed the party. They were the ones ordered to leave the party after being rowdy, and according to Lorena, on her deathbed, she said that he and his friends encountered a boy who just left the party and jumped him. Lorena was questioned but refused to say anything and was taken into custody. Her silence on the matter during the trial led to her being sent to the reform school along with other women in the trial who refused to cooperate, but she figured a reform sentence for her would be better than a life sentence for her brother, the possible killer, instead of justice being served. So what she's...
Did she understand that other people were also going to go to jail?
Probably not. I mean, like, she saw everything that happened and still didn't say anything because that's her brother. But basically, she's saying my brother was the one with two other guys. There's a lot of problems with this, though. Mostly because Jose was seen at the party close to 12:30 and was seen leaving about 15 minutes before 30th Street guys pulled up, and he was in the company of two men. Some people say that maybe Encinas hung around, him and two guys hung around and returned out of anger of being kicked out, and they found him on the path up and said, well, we'll just jump this guy. But like, just thinking about motives, remember his pockets were outturned. This was mostly a mugging because a lot of men in the area where they worked at the Sunny Sally packing plant, and the party was the day after payday, so maybe someone knew that he had been paid, so maybe it's somebody that had worked at the plant.
Or they wanted it to look like a mugging.
Exactly. But like, I just can't...
But why?
No, it's a mystery to this day. Like, maybe he was drunk and fought back and was killed because he was drunk. Maybe the mugging was an afterthought.
Maybe he had turned his pockets out.
Yeah, maybe
he was looking for a mint.
Exactly. Maybe his pockets were turned out and he was looking for something and he got jumped on the way. But Lorena was saying on her deathbed that her brother was the one that killed him. What actually happened was always going to remain a mystery. It's never going to be solved, and that's the murder at Sleepy Lagoon.
Okay. But who did it?
I know that's a mystery. It's never going to be solved, but like, who did it?
You can tell me, though. Yeah. I mean, we'll turn the microphones off.
I know.
Let's ask the guy from Pacific Dining Car who did it.
James Alroy's The Big Nowhere, he supposes that Dudley Smith was the one that did it, and it was done to stir up...
Which one was Dudley Smith again?
Do you see LA Confidential?
Yeah.
It's the guy from Babe, the actor who plays Babe, who's like the main police
Farmer
chief.
Hoggett?
Farmer Hoggett.
You think this goes up to all the way to the top?
To Farmer Hoggett? But anyways, they're saying that he did that to stir up all the trouble that was created afterwards.
There's some conspiracy theories about what I'm about to talk about. Well, there's one. They think that the talking duck did it. Okay, so that's the climate. Racist people. But in yours, they're observing Mexican on Mexican crime and saying, look what they're like, look what they do.
Yeah.
Well, this time they're involved. Cherry Poppin' Daddy Song, Cherry Poppin' Daddy Song. It's time to talk about the Zoot Suit Riots. That's my best interpretation of how the beat of that song goes.
Oh, okay, yeah. I don't remember at all, and I'm glad I don't.
You don't remember your favorite song from the 90s?
Yeah, I do remember Walking on Sunshine.
My favorite swing revival song.
Yeah.
I'm walking on Zoot Suits. Well, that's what these people were doing. That was the spark that lit the fuse. Now we're going to study everyone's favorite part of an explosion, the fuse. It was a fashionable fuse. What a fashionable fuse. I'm going to reiterate a little bit what it looked like and what it meant. I have a little bit more to say about what it meant.
Okay.
Zoot Suit, a.k.a. drape shapes, or the drape, people would call it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess you're saying it came from drape suits, the Zoot Suits, but it came from Harlem.
Yeah.
Harlem in the 30s.
I like how aggressively you said that. It came from Harlem.
Okay, that's my new science fiction novel. It was the style of choice amongst young black men going through the next phase of Harlem after the Harlem Renaissance.
Yeah.
So this was the new thing. It was worn by... We're here to interview you. You're not getting the job. Someone just walked in and I riffed.
That was a good riff, too. He was long gone by the time you said any of that.
Yeah, well, he felt it. So it was worn by the people going to the new music clubs, and soon the musicians themselves were wearing these Zoot Suits. Most notably Cab Calloway, who called them the only totally and truly American civilian suit. Oh, nice. He screamed it, though.
Hello, God, it's me, Cab Calloway, and I'm wearing a Zoot Suit.
I was crazy about Cab Calloway for like a year.
Yeah, I remember that.
Now, what did they look like? Big white hat, long coat that went to the fingertips with overly broad shoulders, high-waisted pants that ballooned out and then tightened up the ankles, complete with a long chain hanging down to the knees. Some people wore pants called ankle chokers because they were so tight at the ankles that they would need lubricant to get them on over their feet. The suits were colorful and they were usually worn with pointy shoes or boot shiny, pompadour haircut on top, ducktail on the back.
It's a great look.
The original mullet. So it started out as a black male fashion statement, but there were other minorities who were going to these clubs where the people were wearing them. They were getting inspired to dress the same as them. So it was not only now young black men, but young Jewish men, young Italian men, those people in the mafia, young Filipino men, most notably young Latino men dressing in Zoot Suits now. Yeah. So it wasn't just one group. It's easy to focus on those were Mexican people. Yeah. No, it was a lot of different oppressed people that were wearing it. Yeah. It was already a sort of uniform of young men who weren't accepted in mainstream society at the time, and that was something that played perfectly into a feeling that second generation Mexican kids in Los Angeles were dealing with at the time, like you were saying. But I'm going to say it again. They didn't quite identify or want to be part of their Mexican culture, and at the same time, they didn't quite identify or want to be part of or were allowed to be part of American culture. Yeah. So they decided to make a third culture for themselves, and these young men called themselves Pachucos, and the Zoot Suit was their uniform for a lot of people. They didn't want to be confined to the parts of town that were relegated to Latinos, but they were also being abused and humiliated by the white parts of town whenever they went there. So this new identity was a way to reclaim their dignity and create their own acceptance.
We will not be partying in Brentwood this evening.
No, not today.
Not today. El Monte sounds just fine with me.
I'm surprised that some of the areas that we're going to be talking about, like you came all the way from Boyle Heights for this?
I remember hearing Jaime Hernandez talk about, because he grew up in Oxnard and he come all the way to Hollywood. I'm like, that's far.
Yeah.
You came all the way over here to party? That's far.
I came all the way here to party. So they even made up their own slang, the Pachucos. It was called Calo. All this was done, they were wearing Zoot Suits. Yeah. So a kid at the time said that the suit made him feel empowered, like he was wearing a suit of armor. So it made you feel good to dress like this. Its flamboyantness was also an affront to the conventional image of masculinity at the time, and it wasn't just a look for men either. There were Pachucas who wore the long coats, but they had sweaters under them and dark lipstick and skirts that stopped above the knees. So that was
great.
That was the Pachuca look.
That's a great look.
This was their form of resistance. For some people. Yeah. Others just liked the way it looked. Yeah. I guarantee it.
I would have been nervous and dressed like that.
Yeah.
Exactly. I would have been confident.
You wanted to fit in because all your friends dressed like that. I like Spitfire.
Yeah, I could kickflip.
It was a ton of different types of Mexican kids dressing like this that didn't necessarily all share the same set of beliefs. They just dressed the same. Yeah. Which made what was about to happen even more horrible and confusing for a lot of people. Racial tension was running high. In Los Angeles during World War II, Executive Order Episode 9066 sent all the Japanese people away. Did you already say that?
I might have.
And the difference between a grand jury and a trial jury.
I'll stop you less than you stopped me.
789. So that was February 1942, but it didn't even take an entire year before people were desperate for a new scapegoat in the city, and they found it in Mexican people. Yeah. In the 20s, more immigrants were coming into the... have you heard about Bracero? More immigrants were coming into the U.S. from places where people had darker skin. And in 1924, Congress tried to close the borders to everywhere but Northern and Western Europe. Like nationwide ban.
Yeah.
Not even Canada. But
you're too white.
pass. So that failed, and after decades of whitewashing and Mexican deportations, Los Angeles was now becoming noticeably more Mexican again by the 1940s.
Yeah.
Add to that the U.S. made a deal with Mexico during World War II to bring workers from Mexico to California, work agricultural jobs left empty because Americans got drafted. So this created an even bigger influx of Mexicans into the area that caused a lot of white resentment.
White resentment feels like the only kind of resentment. Go ahead.
Wow, Greg has a lot of white resentment. So it was a lot of white resentment for taking what they saw as their jobs for them, even though they were not in the country.
And now you have a job.
I could do both. I could commute.
I'll work both jobs.
Yeah.
As long as they don't get one job.
Yeah. So now by the early 40s, there were some 250,000 Mexican Americans living in Los Angeles, according to the census, who didn't know how to categorize them other than white. So they were just listed as white.
In quotations.
Yeah.
White.
There's the white
Blanco.
people, and then there's the white people. So a lot of misplaced resentment, a lot of paranoia of the other, and a lot of good old-fashioned white people racism created a perfectly wound racist Jack-in-the-Box in the city. Wait till you hear what song that was playing. The theme song to The Birth of a Nation. Wait till you hear what it said when it came out. And it didn't help that the newspapers were gladly feeding into people's fears. They started publishing articles saying that any Mexican person in a zoot suit was a gangster. And to be fair, the 38th Street gang was known for wearing zoot suits, but the overwhelming majority of people in zoot suits were just kids trying to fit in. It was your Greg of the 90s.
It was me wearing girl skateboard shirts. Exactly. Girl skateboard shirts, cargo pants.
Don't get me started on the Adidas riots. Surprisingly, the newspapers at the time run by guys like Harrison Gray Otis didn't see that nuance that not all Mexican people were in gangs. So they kept hammering away the notion that a zoot suit equaled a criminal and created an association in people's minds between Mexican people and crime that is still very much there to a lot of people today. But hey, who actually pays attention to the media? In late 1942...
Fake news, right?
Take news at face value. What's the problem? In late 1942, the thing the local papers focused on in particular was that there was a crime wave being committed by zoot suiters.
Yeah.
There were stories of kids in zoot suits beating people up all around town, but there was very little basis in fact for most of these stories. There was crime, like you said, being committed by some kids who happen to wear zoot suits, but not any worse than kids dressed any other way. Exactly. It was just kids.
Yeah.
It was, what's that James Dean movie?
Rebel Without a Cause?
No, another one.
East of Eden, Giant? There's only 3.
No, he did another one recently. I don't remember. Teenage Angst.
It's Rebel Without a Cause. The fact that you said no to that one, weird.
I don't think he was in that one.
It's the
What's
one
with
that
Sal Mineo?
I can't name another Sal Mineo movie.
Well, there weren't many. There was no actual increase in crime during this crime wave. There was no evidence of that. But almost weekly, there was another story in a newspaper about how zoot suiters were going around beating and robbing people. They were being called murderers and rapists for the last time ever in American history. The LA Times called them gaymen dandies and called their suits a badge of delinquency.
Wow. That's just responsible coverage. Responsible media coverage.
Headline. In December 1942, there was a big article by the chief of the criminal division of the sheriff's office, Clem Peoples, in a tabloid called Sensation, all about the workings of the Mexican gangs in the city. On December 31st, there was a story about how police claimed a drunken Pachuco shot and killed a cop at a cafe on North Main Street. The Herald Express claimed they got an anonymous tip saying that 500 Pachucos were going to gather one night and kill every cop that they see. We all remember the great Pachuco cop slaughter of 1942.
Exodus,
oh, you don't?
Order 9066?
Yeah. They all opened up their transponders and somehow Yoda had to go first. Very few of these stories had any basis in reality at all. But it played into white people's fears and it sold papers, didn't it? They sold papers, don't they?
Yeah.
It's all just harmless lies to make some money and make people feel safe. Except it wasn't. It made white people hate and fear anyone in a zoot suit and by extension, anyone in a Mexican suit.
Yeah. A what?
People were calling the cops on kids in zoot suits who didn't get off the sidewalk when a white person walked by.
God.
In Los Angeles. This was happening.
Yeah, Los Angeles of the 40s.
Yeah, Los Angeles,
Not really
California.
That long ago.
Earlier in 1942, things had gotten so bad that it was proposed to make a law against wearing zoot suits in Los Angeles, but it was not approved. But towards the end of that year, cops and Latinos were having clashes once a week. By spring 1943, that went up to 2 or 3 clashes every single day. On March 7th, 1943, 2 kids from Southgate named Valentine Valdez and Adolf Vargas were ordered by the Justice of the Peace to never wear zoot suits again or talk to anyone who does and have their ducktail haircuts shaved off, and they had to show up to court once a month for a haircut inspection.
Wow. Did the cops have to see their papers? They were fighting the Nazis. I'm confused.
Yeah, it's so weird to have these footage of like, oh, they're cutting these kids' hair in the middle of the street. Oh, what was going on in Germany at the time? Oh, they were cutting Jewish people's hair off in the middle of the street. So this is how crazy a fashion statement was driving people. White people were anxious because of the war, and the best cops in the city were off brutalizing Nazis, so they were looking for any way to feel safe. So they had all these subpar cops. The white people didn't feel safe. So enter the proud boys of the U.S. military.
My favorite part of this story is the one that makes me the saddest, but I like trauma.
When the war started, LA was teeming with soldiers stationed nearby, and the majority of them were white from the middle of the country, and it's safe to say that almost all of them had never met a Latino person before. What they saw around LA was a growing population of people who didn't look like them, and in their eyes were un-American because they weren't in the military like they were. They saw these young Mexican men as draft dodgers, but the thing was most of these kids they were seeing were too young to join the military. Over 500,000 Latinos fought in World War II, so right there, their hatred was baseless. Just because you wore a zoot suit didn't mean you didn't want to fight for your country. Some didn't, but many did. They were just waiting until they were old enough, and that's why they were in town.
And if you're a draft dodger, it doesn't mean that you're obligated to go. It's like you're waiting for the card to come in the mail.
Yeah, you haven't been drafted
killed in
yet.
Germany. Can't wait to die
Come
in
on
France.
down. Add on top of that, like we talked about, there was the rationing of wool and silk and other clothing materials of zoot suits, of which zoot suits were using more than their fair share of.
That was
these kids
part of the deal.
Yeah, these kids were wearing huge suits made of wool and silk when wool and silk were needed to be turned into bullets. That is so funny. That is.
We should make
let me
that
write
that
down
Let's
again.
make that a thing. Let's make that a thing, huh?
But wait, were the bullets turned into clothes? There was even a Disney short in March 1943 where Donald Duck is tempted to waste resources by an evil Donald Duck wearing a Donald Duck. I know Disney. He was wearing a zoot suit with a swastika bow tie.
Do you know what's bothersome about that?
What
is that? Donald was a sailor.
Wearing this is Donald Duck ends up savagely beating Zoot Suit Donald Duck. This is not a Disney short that held up very well because this came out before.
Oh, really?
These events happened, yeah.
Oh, so you're saying that Donald Duck inspired mass beatings across the city.
But I've been trying to pin this on Donald Duck for years. I'm just waiting to hire the dream team.
He's our Arthur Lee Allen.
There were underground tailors, bootleg tailors making these suits illegally, so people saw zoot suits as unpatriotic in that sense because it was a waste of resources. And nobody is going to see that as more unpatriotic than some young sailor from Ohio who wanted to go kill Japanese people but was stuck in LA and bored and looking for something to do or looking for trouble to cause. Around April, May 1943, there were over 18 altercations around LA between soldiers and young men in the city that weren't even always Latino. Like, soldiers were just looking for fights. A lot of the soldiers were just looking for fights. A lot of soldiers were looking for fights. A lot of soldiers were turned into bullets. In one incident, apparently 7 civilians ended up getting killed.
What?
There's not much about that.
Yeah.
It wasn't just LA either. There was also an incident around this same time in Oakland of soldiers attacking Latino and black zoot suiters. On May 10th, a group of Latino kids went to go dancing at the Aragon Ballroom in Venice, or as some local high school white kids put it, a group of Latino kids in zoot suits took over the Aragon Ballroom in Venice.
Like 8 people showed up, like they're taking
They were salsa dancing. I wanted to do a 2-step. This led to some bored sailors nearby hearing about it and coming over to kick out the zoot suiters, which led to a sailor claiming he got stabbed by one of them, which led to a brawl between 500 sailors and civilians and some kids in zoot suits, which led to the cops arresting all the kids wearing a zoot suit for their own protection. Just 2 days later, a fire broke out in Venice that got blamed on the kids in the zoot suits, even though they were in prison. So this was the climate leading up to May 31st, 1943. A group of sailors was at 699 North Main Street, right near Olvera Street, right near the Italian-American Museum, which loves us. And they started harassing some Latinas, and some zoot suit kids tried to make them stop, and a sailor named Joe Dacey Coleman ended up getting his jaw broken.
Wow.
It doesn't seem like things escalated much after that, but the sailors went back to the Naval Reserve Armory in Chavez Ravine, which is now the Frank Hotchkin Memorial Training Center for the fire department.
They have a piece of the Twin Towers there.
Really? Thieves.
Where'd you get that? Ghouls.
Stories started to circulate in the armory about this incident, and within a couple days, a frenzy was whipped up to how dare an unpatriotic Mexican kid lay a finger on a holy white American soldier. Then comes the night of June 3rd. 50 sailors were so upset about what happened to Coleman that they stormed out of the armory and headed downtown carrying with them clubs and whatever else they had on hand that they could use for a beating.
Yeah.
They went to the 1700 block of North Main Street, kind of near Lincoln Heights, and got into a brawl with, according to the sailors, about 35 zoot suiters. Police showed up quickly and promptly arrested the zoot suiters and sent the sailors back to the base.
You crazy kids.
You crazy kids. You criminals. Get home, you crazy kids. Get in the car. There were no serious injuries, but this just riled up the sailors at the base even more, and then the story got even more exaggerated. They got beaten unprovoked. They robbed them. How dare they? Then on the night of June 4th, 200 sailors now took to the streets looking for anyone wearing a zoot suit, and the Zoot Suit Riot was on. These white sailors attacked any Latino kid they saw in a zoot suit, beat them up, would rip their clothes, sometime entirely off, leaving this person naked and beaten in the street. They would pee on the clothes or they would burn them. They went into the California Theater, which is a couple blocks from the Cecil, and made the manager stop the movie, turn on the lights so they could grab anyone wearing a zoot suit, drag them into the street, beat them, rip off their clothes.
Wow.
If you had a ducktail haircut, like we said, they would cut it off after they beat you in the middle of the street. They went on a rampage through downtown. The cops did nothing. The cops followed the sailors around, but were told to let them do whatever they want and let the military...
Who?
By their chief.
Jesus. Who was the chief at the time in the 40s?
I don't know. Hitler?
Was it Jim Davis?
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't. You're right. It doesn't matter.
They were told to let the military police deal with them. They kept saying it's not our job to stop them.
I was just following orders.
Yeah. I was just following orders. Don't quote me in 4 years. They were basically escorts for the sailors, but any Mexican kid in a zoot suit that fought back was immediately arrested and blamed for what was happening.
Yeah.
What a bad day. So you had a bad day. But the sailors must have gotten it out of their system, and they'll leave people alone now, right?
Right.
June 5th. This night, even more sailors came from the armory, and by now the cops actually were doing something. They were joining them. Off-duty cops were now marching side by side with the sailors, beating anyone in a zoot suit. They called themselves the Vengeance Squad.
Vengeance against what?
Against the crime wave. On top of that, since they were cops, they knew where the Pachucos lived, and some of them seemed to have been leading the mobs to the houses of known Pachucos.
Like a private residence.
Yeah. They were stopping the trolley cars in the middle of the street, dragging people in zoot suits off of them, and by this point, it wasn't even just people who were in zoot suits. It was anyone who was Mexican. And it wasn't even just anyone who was Mexican. It was black people. It was Filipino people, whoever happened to be in their way. Even some white kids were getting beaten. They dragged a black man off the trolley who was coming home from his job at a military defense plant. He was a military defense plant worker in his uniform. They gouged his eye out.
Are you serious?
They dragged him off a trolley and gouged his eye out. The guy making munitions for them. But so much horror and brutality in the streets of LA, certainly the media was outraged. No. Newspapers were praising the sailors as heroes for finally doing something about the Mexican crime wave. The infallible LA Times had a headline that said Zoot Suiters learn lesson and fight with servicemen. One paper ran an article on how to de-zoot a Zoot Suiter properly. Radio stations were broadcasting where they thought the violence was going to take place that night for anyone who might want to join in. And people did. June 6th had an even bigger mob than the night before, and now they were expanding out of downtown. 20 taxi drivers offered free rides to the sailors to take them to Boyle Heights, where they knew Mexican people lived, and the beatings continued there.
It must have been a really great week if you were a Nazi.
I know.
Like to have free taxi rides.
Yeah, and the underground Nazi movement that was going on at the same time, probably. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hail Hydra. I learned that in a movie once. But
one of the best movies I've ever seen.
So here, these movies are still coming out. But these sailors weren't alone anymore by this night. Now, in addition to their off-duty cop partners, now they had civilians who wanted in on the violence, some who came all the way from San Diego and Las Vegas just to beat Mexican people. Now they also had Army boys and the Marines coming from Fort MacArthur and El Toro in Orange County joining them.
Shouldn't you be dying in Europe right now?
They were waiting to do that. There was also another group of soldiers roaming the Pike in Long Beach looking for anybody in a zoot suit, and that wasn't even the worst night. Here's June 7th. Some 5,000 white soldiers, cops, civilians were roaming the streets of LA looking for minorities to beat. 5,000 people.
That's a lot of people.
They raided the Orpheum looking for people. By this point, the Mexican community was terrified. There were moms wandering around the streets trying to find their sons. They didn't know where their kids were. They were begging cops not to arrest their sons who were lying beaten on the street. Please don't arrest my kid. Hundreds of them went to jails hoping that their son was in there and not dead somewhere. Some of these kids being beaten were 12 years old. And like I said, a lot of them were dressed in zoot suits just because like their brother or their friend dressed like that. They just thought it looked cool. They didn't know the connotations. They didn't know why this was happening to them. It didn't make sense. On top of that, on the night of the 7th, barely half the victims were actually in zoot suits at this point. It's a rampage.
Yeah, it's just minority groups.
Kids were begging cops to arrest them because at least they'd be safe in jail. Yeah. You can't beat me there. Well,
someone else will, but you won't.
Yeah, at least
someone without a club will beat me.
Yeah, it'll be an officially sanctioned beating. The Council for Latin American Youth sent a telegram to President Roosevelt begging him to do something. There was also those who fought back. This is the best part of the story. One group of zoot suiters went to the military bases themselves to try to stop the soldiers before they even left. The best story, here's the whole thing. Our old friend Charlotta Bass.
Oh, okay.
From the California Eagle newspaper
and the
grand jury. Wait, was it the grand jury or the trial jury? The California Eagle newspaper down on Central Avenue, which we've talked about before. From the start of the rioting, she was printing articles decrying the way the other newspapers in town were framing the narrative here and urged the black community to rise up and stand with the Mexican community. She had caught wind that on the night of the 7th, the white mob was planning to start heading down into South Central and Watts and really target the black community. Yeah. She contacted the authorities, urging them, stop the rioters now, because she knew that if a bunch of white people come down into Watts, someone's going to die, and it's not going to be a black person. You have to put a stop to this. Nobody did anything. Nobody ever stops anything, because bad people rule the world. So instead, the Mexican and black community united and met at the intersection of 12th and Central, hid most of their group in alleys and out of sight, and left 20 black men in the middle of the street, and they waited. Right on cue, a mob of white people started marching down the street towards that intersection. When they got there, 500 black and Mexican men, women, boys, girls, rival gang members, they all came out of the shadows and surrounded the white mob, who of course freaked out and tried to run. That's when the cops showed up and arrested as many people of color as they could. Some people look back on this as the Battle of 12th Street, which is great. This didn't end the violence. The mob just went to other parts of the town and did the stuff I was describing to you. But because of this, the next day, June 8th, the Navy and Army ordered the city of LA off limits to all unauthorized military personnel. They even had military police patrolling the streets to arrest any soldiers that they found ignoring the ban. It took the community standing up for the military. But again, the military...
Standing up against the military.
Yes, to fight the military. This wasn't an admission of guilt by the military. They defended the actions of the soldiers, but they claimed they were afraid of the soldiers becoming so rowdy they'd mutiny or something like that. I don't know what their reasoning was, but they weren't allowed in LA anymore. The city of LA wanted to end too, but not because they didn't like what was happening. They just realized the Latino community was the workforce they were depending on during the war, and they didn't want them damaged.
Don't damage my cogs. Jesus.
Even so, that same day, the LA City Council banned zoot suits in Los Angeles. What? They said the zoot suit has become a badge of hoodlumism. As a bunch of people in Navy outfits stand behind them. Nice uniform. Yeah, boys, you look great. Looking good, boys. We prohibit nudism by an ordinance, and if we can arrest people for being underdressed, we can do so for being overdressed. If you were caught wearing a zoot suit in LA, you had to go to jail for 50 days. Yeah. On June 9th, there were still a few stray confrontations, but nothing nearly as bad as what had happened a couple days before. And on June 10th, it was pretty much over. In the end, luckily, there were no deaths, but the number of victims seriously injured, it ranges from around 90 to 150 amongst the Latino and minority, as opposed to the 18 soldiers that got hurt. The numbers for arrests range too, but it's estimated that as many as 600 Latinos were taken in during the riots, while a whopping 9 soldiers were arrested. The rioting was over in LA, but over the next few weeks, similar incidents broke out in other parts of California, also Texas, Arizona, Chicago, Detroit, New York City. 2 guys in Gene Krupa's band were beaten for wearing zoot suits on stage in Philadelphia. Wow, Philly. Always on brand, Philadelphia. The general consensus from the rest of the country looking from the outside at what had happened in LA was that people felt the soldiers had acted racistly, and this was a bad thing. Yeah. Eleanor Roosevelt condemned the actions of the soldiers. That's not how the establishment in LA saw it. The LA Times responded to Eleanor Roosevelt's feeling by calling her a communist and saying we like the Mexicans and think they like us. And thus La Opinion was born. Mayor Fletcher Bowron blamed the riots not on racism but on juvenile delinquents. Bowron, you're letting me down. I know. Finally, Governor Earl Warren, later of the Warren Report, formed a committee to investigate why all this happened, and they concluded that it was in fact racism. Turns out racism. Racism. It was racism with the help of its old allies, the LAPD, doing nothing to stop anything, and local media coverage fanning the flames. In response, the LA County Board of Supervisors started new human relations committees and made the LAPD start giving training to its officers in a revolutionary new idea to start treating all people as equals. I'm glad that worked out from the 40s on. No, I'm glad. Problem solved. It was all worth it. There was a lot of fear and confusion that week left in the city. Some suspected the LAPD orchestrated the whole thing to distract people from a cop that was on trial at the time. Wow. But what was confusing still is that this is still referred to as a riot.
It's not.
There were some people taking advantage of the chaos and looting and mugging and stuff like that, but not many. A riot is an oppressed community venting their rage and frustration at how they're being treated. This wasn't that. This was the majority ganging up and attacking the minority. This wasn't a riot. It was crystal knocked on the streets of Los Angeles, which I've explained to you many times. You keep saying that sounds delicious, and I keep having to explain to you what it is. All it did was scare an entire generation of the local Latino community. These families saw what their white neighbors really felt about them and what they were capable of, and all they learned was that they were behaving like animals, and the authorities gave them permission to do whatever they wanted. They were being attacked for the way they dressed, exactly how you see people ripping hijabs off Muslim women today. Like, it's the same thing. This scared a lot of families into assimilating as quick as they could, and they would abandon their culture. No more speaking Spanish. We're American now. It was a sad thing, but guess what? That abandoning of the culture led to the rise of the Chicano movement a couple decades later and made the community stronger than ever. Very important people learned lessons from the Zoot Suit Riots because, as it turns out, even though they weren't in LA at the time, Cesar Chavez and Malcolm X were Zoot Suit kids. Dolores Huerta was a Pachuca, and these riots showed them the country's true colors. And once they got a little older, they had formed some very strong opinions about that. Now, excuse me, because I've been sitting on my giant oversized chain for the last 20 minutes and I can't feel my legs through my helium-filled balloon pants.
I've been sitting on my hair for like an hour.
There's DuckTales itching me. So those are the Zoot Suit Riots. A another horrible chapter of Los Angeles history.
Yeah.
Brought to you by
Two Silly Guys. I'm glad that we covered that because that's something that is a defining moment in the history of the city and the history of the police department.
Yeah, well, I mean, it really was a moment of like, oh, that's who you are. That's how you feel. Okay. Yeah, it's disgusting. Like, it really was making me sad and depressed to read all this because it's the same exact thing that was happening in Germany. Like, there's so many times where we've talked about what was going on in Los Angeles and like, this is what the Nazis were doing. Like, they were doing the same exact thing.
And we're like, no, don't ever be like them.
Yeah.
Anyways, if you're Japanese, you gotta go. We're gonna put you away for a while.
They're not Jewish. It's different because they're Japanese and Mexican and black.
And Filipino and Italian.
And some Jewish. It's really disgusting.
Yeah.
It's despicable. It's shameful. I
shameful.
hate it.
It's very shameful.
But hey, LA, the city. She loves me.
I think
she loves me. She loves me not.
she loves me if I'm a white sailor or a white cop.
And of course, it was the sailors in the stupidest of the military uniforms. Their Gilligan's hats and their big giant. Well, they were wearing big giant collars too.
Yeah, exactly.
They should have gotten along.
It is the.
Oh, you like big collars? So do I.
It's
I like
most,
big collars, and I cannot lie.
It's the most flamboyant of the military uniforms.
Yeah, it is. If only they had the village people to show them the error of their ways.
Like I was saying, this is one of the defining moments in the city of a lot of the Mexican American community, of youth culture, of the police department. Like you said, a lot of good came out of it eventually, but like in the moment,
it took 20 years, at least, until people were like, "How come my family doesn't speak Spanish anymore?
How come gangs are so much more aggressive now and clicky? Is it because their dads were beat up by sailors and no one did anything about it? I don't know. Maybe the murder as well, and the way you can turn a tragedy and you whip it into a frenzy, and then you create Zoot Suit Riots out of that. Yeah. The Watts riots and the LA riots, they all start with small incidents and then it just become larger. Like it's like a tornado.
It's a tornado.
A tornado. It's like a natural disaster. It's like yeah, and those are all just like stains on the history of the city.
Very stained city.
Yeah, very stained city.
Meanwhile, across town, Clark Gable, Casablanca was sweeping the nation. It's sad. It's really sad. Maybe one of our saddest episodes.
Probably.
Now let's get to our listener question.
Well, then, very not sad.
So let's put that all of our head. This one is from the Instagrammer formerly known as Uranga Emilio, now known as a symbol. He turned himself into a symbol.
The fan formerly known as Emilio Uranga.
Yeah. 2 questions. What's the best park in the city? And is this booze? That's a callback. Is this booze? This is a callback from LA Times episode, actually.
No, it's not LA Times. It's the nicknames episode.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, because Schuler. Is this booze?
Yeah, I knew it was in a newspaper.
Yeah.
I know things.
I remember things I do. I don't dump out information like Greg.
Enough with the facetiousness. What's the best park in the city?
I live in Echo Park, and I follow a series of alleyways that lead me to a path that leads to Elysian Park. And Elysian Park is my favorite because
love Elysian Park.
I do love Elysian Park a lot. It's very beautiful. Dodger Stadium's there. Chavez Ravine was there.
The Naval Armory was there.
I know all the walking paths. I really love looking over the 5 freeway and Frogtown and Lincoln Heights.
Nodding approvingly.
I love Elysian Park a lot. It's a very...
But is it a park that you hang out in? I mean, I know that I once was in a lowrider parade there, but is it a place where you really hang out?
Yeah. That part where you're in the lowrider parade, that's a place where families meet and they have parties and picnics and stuff, and it's very beautiful. And it's a very big park too.
It is. I consider that more on par with Griffith Park because it is sort of. It's not quite because the place I'm thinking of is a more contained place.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, this is almost more of a wilderness, like an urban wilderness than a park.
That's why I like it, because it is an urban wilderness. Yeah. Like I can walk to Chinatown through Elysian Park. There's smaller parks within, like there's Leo Lodi Park, which is kind of in the hills there. There's like a little rec center that's near the police academy. There's a lot of paths, and Angels Point is on the other side of the Stadium Way or whatever. It's a very beautiful park, and it's very nice, and you can walk around. A lot of families hang out there. It isn't just like a secluded park.
Yeah.
It's a good place for families to meet. Families who live in apartments, and they can go and have a giant party there. And can I tell you one of my favorite stories about my dad going through Elysian Park?
I think I know this story, but for the listener.
My dad, when he was a kid, went to a Dodger game with his friends and his little brother. So they walk there to the game, and they're coming back, and they get recognized from a guy in the neighborhood, and they're like, "Hey, you can't walk through the park at night. You want to get in?" And they're like, "No, we don't want to." Like, "No, get in. I know your dad. I'll take you home. I just don't want you walking the park, and it's dangerous." And I'm like, "No." They're like, "Oh, fine. Get on the hood of my car, and I'll drive you to Echo Park Avenue." And they're like, all right. So these 4 kids rode on the hood of a car as the guy was going up and down hills. Like it's death proof.
See, I don't know this story. I thought you were going to tell the story about how your dad saw a guy hanging from a tree.
Oh, yeah. You want to know that story?
He didn't. Let's hear that tree.
Oh, yeah. No, he didn't see it, but he was one of the guys in a gang. I forgot what he had. There was like a murder on top of a murder as a revenge, and they got
he murdered his murdered body.
I can't remember the specifics because it's a murder and it's a crime, and I don't know all of it. But one of the guys was left hanging off the path on a tree naked.
He always said, "Don't leave me hanging." That's a disturbing story. That's what I always think about when I think about Elysian Park is your dad's childhood trauma. Well, my favorite park, I don't know if this is maybe. I mean, I don't go to as many parks. Let's just say what the place is. I really like Los Encinos Park in Encino, the duck pond.
The duck pond.
The one that I've talked about so many times on this podcast. Yeah. But it is the perfect kind of, because I was thinking about Balboa Park, which is also nice, but that's too big and there's so many people there all the time. Yeah. But Los Encinos, it's contained, which I like. Manageable. It's never really that crowded. Yeah. It's quiet. You could just go there and like do whatever you want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh my God.
Yeah. It's very quiet and peaceful there. And I like that. And you can have a party or have lunch or whatever you want there. So it gets done what a park is supposed to do. It's just not as crowded.
Okay. If you're not talking about wilderness parks, there's a park in Lincoln Heights. I think it's Plaza de la Raza.
Is that the one where we got Tejuino?
No, that's not it. That's not Lincoln Heights. That's Boyle Heights.
Yeah, right. That was Mariachi Plaza.
That was Mariachi Plaza. Yeah. This is a park that in Lincoln Heights that my grandpa used to take me to, and they have I don't know if it was a kids area, but it was like a pyramid, like an Aztec temple. I think it was a kids area because I used to climb.
You can play Sacrifice.
Yeah. But they used to have an alligator farm there. I remember hearing about that. I wanted to do. I'm not a whole episode on alligator farm, but they used to have an alligator farm.
Why not?
It's Ali Meekly. We pretty much do
whatever we want.
I only have one boss, and it's you. It's more of a 51-49% thing.
Well, you shouldn't have sold me that extra share.
Needed the money.
Well, there's other, I like Balboa Park, like I said, but I also, O'Melveny Park in the northern part of the valley, which is kind of more of a wilderness sort of park. That's a nice park if you are looking to do trails and stuff. Yeah. You can go pretty deep in that place and see areas that are not the city.
Yeah. Lots of trees, and then you'll just run into satanic symbols spray painted on weird brick walls.
I remember me and my friends in high school, you can take a trail, the hills above the north part of the valley. You could take a trail to get all the way to the top, and we never, we tried 4 times, and we never made it all the way to the top because it was so hard. Yeah. We weren't prepared, and it's a really long hike, and apparently you can see the ocean from up there, but I'll never know.
That's how I feel about the Echo Mountain Trail, because I always wanted to get to the ridge where Echo Mountain was, and now I know why there was a funicular. Because
that's too big.
I only made it halfway after an hour and a half hiking. I'm I can't do this. It's hard, it's tight, and it's steep. Anyways, that's the best park in the city.
A third question: what's the hardest, tightest, steepest park in the city?
What did I just say?
My body.
My abs.
If you have a question you want to submit to us, you can send it to us on our Instagram at LA_Meekly. You can follow us there as well. Follow us and send questions on Twitter at LA Meekly. You can email us, la.meekly@gmail.com. You can also send us requests for episodes, or if you want to be part of a field trip episode, email us there or contact us any of those ways. Facebook, our Tumblr,
lameekly.tumblr.com. We have a YouTube channel as well. Feel free to subscribe to that. You can listen to all of us.
It's an easier way to listen to if you don't use iTunes or Stitcher or whatever.
And you hate that podcast app.
Speaking of iTunes, leave us a review. Why don't you?
Give it a try. Write a sentence, maybe. I don't know.
Leave us a review on iTunes. It helps us out. It makes us look better. It keeps us going. It keeps us getting new fans so we can keep going. It's easy to do. If you have an iPhone, open the podcast app. Just look for us there. Support us on Patreon for as little as $5 a month. We can send you handwritten postcards. You can keep us going financially because we depend on you financially. I've quit my job.
I need more Patreon subscribers.
Melissa, if you're listening, I was fired. I didn't quit my job.
I didn't quit my job. I didn't throw a stack of papers at Rick.
They threw a stack of papers at me, and they were severance papers. I'm not getting a severance package.
I got a package for them.
But you give me a severance package. I got the longest, tautest, steepest severance package you ever did see. Yeah, so support us in that way. Any closing thoughts?
All of this was sad, and I can't wait to stop reading about it.
I know, this will be good. It'll be good to walk out this door and forget all this information.
I just remember the saddest parts.
Well, everybody have a good June. Get ready for the summer solstice.
Summer solstice.
Enjoy your Father's Day if you have a father or care about your father.
Yeah.
If you don't, give us money.
Yeah, we'll take it.
That's what you do on Father's Day.
you give two people who aren't fathers money.
Yeah. You're pod fathers.
You pod.
So what was that noise? Oh, Greg supports me. Okay, I'm done.
Bye now.
Bye now.
Thanks for stopping by.
Thanks for joining us. That's been yet another episode of LA Meekly, comparing the U.S. military to Nazis since 2013.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.